This audio program has been produced as a supplement to Longman preparation course for the TOEFL test, Next Generation iBT, by Deborah Phillips. Copyright 2005 by Pearson Education. All rights reserved. The use of this audio program for the purpose of copying, transforming, or adapting in any manner, in whole or in part, is strictly prohibited without prior consent of Pearson Education. CD 3. Listening Post-Test. This section measures your ability to understand conversations and lectures in English. You will listen to one conversation and one lecture. You will hear each conversation and lecture one time. After each conversation or lecture, you will answer some questions about it. The questions typically ask about the main idea and supporting details. Some questions ask about a speaker's purpose or attitude. Answer the questions based on what is stated or implied by the speakers. You may take notes while you listen. You may use your notes to help you answer the questions. Your notes will not be scored. In some questions, you will see this icon. This means that you will hear, but not see, part of the question. You will now begin this part of the listening section. Questions 1 through 6. Listen to a conversation between a student and a professor.
Hello, Dr. Trent.
Hi, Sandy. Come on in. Is there something you wanted to talk about with me?
Yes, it's about the project in music class.
I thought I explained it pretty well in class, but what's your question?
I'm just not sure what you want me to do for the project.
I think I explained it clearly in class. You were in class, weren't you?
Yes, I certainly was.
Well, then why don't you tell me what you heard about the project?
Okay. I know you said that we should choose a composer.
Yes, that's right.
Well, does it have to be a composer that we've talked about in class, or can it be a different composer?
I think the project's a bit easier if you choose one of the composers from class, but you really can choose any composer for the project.
Okay.
So, do you have a composer in mind?
Yes, I do.
And is it one of the composers from class?
No, it's not.
That's okay. Now, what are you supposed to do for the rest of the project after you've chosen a composer?
The next step is to research the composer. I haven't started the research yet, but that doesn't sound too bad to me.
And what are you supposed to learn about the composer?
I know we were supposed to learn about the composer's style, his style of writing music.
Yes, exactly.
But are we also supposed to learn about him? I mean, about his life?
Some background about his life would be helpful, but really, the focus is on the composer's style of writing. Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
And now for the final part of the project. What are you supposed to do for the final part of the project?
That's the hard part, if I understood you correctly in class.
Well, it's the most interesting and challenging part, I think.
We're supposed to write a short piece of music in the style of this composer.
Yes, that's right.
That's a lot harder than doing some research. When you do research, you just have to find things. But in this part of the project, I have to create something on my own. I'm not sure I can do that.
I'm sure you can. Keep in mind that it's just a very short piece, but it does have to be in the style of the composer you've chosen.
That's what I thought you said in class. But it sounds so hard.
It's a challenge, maybe, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it once you get into it.
Number 1. Why is the student talking with the professor? Number 2. Listen again to part of the passage. Then answer the question.
I'm just not sure what you want me to do for the project.
I think I explained it clearly in class. You were in class, weren't you?
Yes, I certainly was.
Well, then why don't you tell me what you heard about the project?
Why does the professor say this?
Well, then why don't you tell me what you heard about the project?
Number 3. Is each of these part of the assignment? Number 4. What does the student say about a composer for her project? Number 5. How does the student seem to feel about the assignment? Number 6. What conclusion can be drawn about the assignment? Questions 7 through 12. Listen as an instructor leads a discussion of some material from a geography class.
Today, we're going to be reviewing some information about the Great Lakes, and we're going to see that traditional beliefs about the Great Lakes do not reflect scientific reality. First of all, can you identify the Great Lakes on this map? Hannah?
Lake Superior is the largest and northernmost of the 5 Great Lakes. The 2 smaller lakes to the southeast of the other lakes are Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. The 2 lakes in the middle are Lake Michigan and Lake Huron.
All right. Now I'm going to ask a question that sounds like an easy question, but really isn't. This deceptively easy question is, which of the Great Lakes is the largest? Jack?
It seems like an easy question because, on the map, you can clearly see that Lake Superior is the largest, and any almanac of world information lists Lake Superior as the world's largest freshwater lake. But I know Lake Superior really isn't the answer you want.
And do you know why Lake Superior isn't the answer I was looking for to the question about which Great Lake is the largest?
Yes, I think so. I believe I read that scientists who have studied the interactions of the lakes have found that Lake Michigan and Lake Huron actually interact as one lake.
That's exactly right. So, in reality, which of the Great Lakes is the largest?
In reality, Lakes Michigan and Huron together are one lake. You could say that Lake Michigan-Huron is the largest of the Great Lakes and the world's largest freshwater lake.
Okay. Now, let's go over the arguments for considering Lake Huron and Lake Michigan one lake rather than 2. Pat?
Well, first of all, Lake Huron and Lake Michigan are at the same elevation, and they are connected by the Mackinac Strait, which is also at the same elevation. If they were 2 distinct lakes, they might be divided by a stream or a river. However, the Mackinac Strait is not a stream or a river. Instead, it is a body of water that is 3 to 5 miles wide, wider than most lakes.
That's right. So what does this mean?
Mackinac Strait is not a river that separates 2 lakes. Instead, it could be argued that there is one giant lake, Michigan-Huron, and this one giant lake narrows at the spot known as Mackinac Strait.
Not bad at all, Pat. I couldn't have done better. Now, let's see if some of the rest of you can match that. What about you, Hannah? What about the flow of water between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron?
The flow of water between the two lakes can reverse. Whenever there's an imbalance in the water levels in the two lakes, the water levels can equalize rapidly in either direction.
Very good, Hannah. And what does this mean?
It means that if the water level becomes higher in Lake Huron, water will flow from Lake Huron into Lake Michigan. And if the water level becomes higher in Lake Michigan, water will flow from Lake Michigan into Lake Huron.
So the flow of water between the two lakes can move in either direction, from Lake Huron into Lake Michigan or from Lake Michigan into Lake Huron. And the water levels in Huron and Michigan will always equalize. What conclusion can be drawn from this information? Pat?
This means that the two lakes, Michigan and Huron, are, in reality, acting like one lake instead of two.
Exactly. You seem to have a good understanding of this material. I'll see you at the next session.
Number 7. What is the instructor's main point? Number 8. Why does the instructor say this?
Now I'm going to ask a question that sounds like an easy question, but really isn't.
Number 9. Which of the Great Lakes has traditionally been considered the largest? Number 10. Listen again to part of the passage, then answer the question.
Not bad at all, Pat. I couldn't have done better. Now, let's see if some of the rest of you can match that. What about you, Hannah? What about the flow of water between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron?
How does the professor seem to feel about the student's response? Number 11. What is true about Lakes Michigan and Huron? Number 12. What can be inferred from the discussion? Speaking Diagnostic Pretest. In this section of the test, you will be able to demonstrate your ability to speak about a variety of topics. In questions 3 and 4, you will first read a short text. You will then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about what you have read and heard. You will need to combine appropriate information from the text and the talk to provide a complete answer to the question. You need to demonstrate your ability to speak clearly and coherently and to accurately convey information about what you read and heard. In questions 5 and 6, you will first listen to part of a conversation or a lecture. You will then be asked a question about what you heard. You need to demonstrate your ability to speak clearly and coherently, and on your ability to accurately convey information about what you heard. You may take notes while you read and while you listen to the conversations and lectures. You may use your notes to help you prepare your response. Listen carefully to the directions for each question. The directions will not be written on the screen. Question 3. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
You're going to take some classes in the humanities department next semester, aren't you, Paul?
I'm taking 2 of them.
I think you're going to sign up for the same 2 I'm taking.
Yeah, we both have the same 2 classes to take.
Have you gotten a signature yet?
A signature? Whose signature do I have to get?
You have to get your advisor's signature so that you can register for the 2 humanities courses you want to take.
Since when? I've never had to get a signature from my advisor to register for classes.
There's a new policy. I saw a notice on the door of the humanities department office.
I haven't seen the notice. I'll have to go check it out. But it says that every student has to get an advisor's signature to register for any class?
To register for any class in the humanities department, any class except the introductory classes.
I guess I'll have to go see my advisor.
Me too.
But first I'm going to go over to the humanities department and look at the notice. Listen, thanks for telling me about this.
How does the student's conversation add to the information included in the notice? Question 4. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
I'd like to make a couple of points now about nonverbal communication. The first point is that nonverbal communication does not require intent. One can communicate nonverbally without intending to do so. Think about a student who's feeling bored listening to a professor drone on and on. This student might not want to make his or her boredom clear to the professor, might not want to offend the professor. But perhaps the student's boredom is clear to anyone who looks at him or her. Now there's another point I'd like to make about nonverbal communication. This second point is that nonverbal communication doesn't take place automatically simply because one person has tried to communicate nonverbally. There has to be communication. If one person makes a certain gesture or expression, for example, but no one understands it, then no communication has taken place. There is communication only if the gesture or expression is understood.
How does the professor supplement the information included in the reading? Question 5. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hey, Mark, you're studying French, aren't you?
No, I'm studying Spanish.
Spanish? Oh, I thought you were studying French, like me. I was going to ask you about some of the French courses.
I don't know about French courses. I only know about Spanish courses. But I think the courses in the two departments are the same. What's your question? Maybe I can help.
My question's about the intermediate courses.
I'm taking intermediate Spanish.
I'm enrolled in the intermediate French course, but it doesn't seem right for me.
Why not? It's too easy?
I wish. No, it's too hard.
Did you study French in high school?
Yes, for 3 years. I had 3 years of French in high school.
I had 3 years of Spanish in high school, and now I'm in the intermediate Spanish class, and it seems to be the right level for me.
I guess that answers my question. I must be in the class I'm supposed to be in. I had 3 years of French in high school, but intermediate French just seems too hard for me. I just can't believe that I might need to go back to beginning French when I studied 3 years of French in high school.
What's the problem in your intermediate French class? Are you sure it's too hard for you?
The problem is that I don't understand anything in class, anything at all.
Do the other students seem to understand better than you?
I don't know. I haven't really noticed.
Maybe you should talk with the other students and see if they're having trouble understanding too. That would help you know if you're in the right place. And maybe you should talk with the professor too and find out if he thinks...
She thinks...
Okay, find out if she thinks you're in the right class.
So you think I should talk to the other students and to the professor?
I do.
But not in French. That's too hard for me.
What does the man suggest the woman should do to deal with the problem she is having? Question 6. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Today, I'll be talking about whales, specifically about how whales use echolocation. Do you know what echolocation is? Well, in broad terms, it's a technique used by whales to determine what's going on in their surroundings. The term is echolocation. This term is composed of two ideas, echo and location. Basically, echolocation refers to the technique of using echoes to determine the location of whatever is in the surrounding area. I have a few points to make about echolocation. The first point is that it seems that only toothed whales can use echolocation. I'm sure you understand that some whales have teeth and others don't. It's only the toothed whales that seem to have this capability. Next, I'd like to talk about what happens during echolocation. A whale uses echolocation by sending out a series of clicks. The clicks then bounce off objects in the water and are reflected back to the whale. So echolocation is actually a series of clicks sent out by a whale that bounce off objects and are then reflected back to the whale. Now, what is it exactly that a whale can learn from these clicks that bounce off an object? Quite a bit, actually. A whale can learn the size and shape of objects that are out there. But that's not all. From the reflected clicks, a whale can learn more than the size and shape of an object. It can also understand how far away the object is, and if the object is moving, the whale can understand how fast the object is moving and what direction it's moving.
What points does the professor make about echolocation? Speaking exercise 6. Number 1. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Beth, you ride a bicycle to school, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And I do too. You saw the notice about bicycle parking?
What notice about bicycle parking?
You didn't see it then.
No, I didn't. What did it say?
It said that we can't park our bicycles on campus near our classrooms.
What do you mean?
The notice says that bicycles can be parked only along the east and west sides of campus in the official bicycle parking locations.
And we can't leave our bicycles anywhere else on campus?
No, we can't.
Well, what's going to happen if I leave my bicycle on campus next to the building where I have class?
If you leave your bicycle anywhere on campus except the authorized lots on the east and west sides of campus, you'll get a ticket.
Oh, no. That doesn't sound fair. I don't like that at all.
You can say that again.
Number 2. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Kathy, did you hear that Dr. Connor's retiring?
I certainly did. I can't believe it. It seems like she's been here forever.
It's too bad she's leaving. I was hoping to take one of her classes.
Me too. You know, my father took several classes from Dr. Connor.
He did? You mean he was a student here?
Yeah, he graduated from here 30 years ago.
And he took classes from Dr. Connor when he was here?
That's right. He's told me how much he enjoyed her classes, so I really want to take at least one before she retires.
Well, she'll only be here for one more semester before she retires, so that'll be your only chance to take one, and my only chance too.
Then we really have to make sure to sign up for at least one of the classes for the spring semester, don't we?
We sure do.
Number 3. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hey, Alice, did you read the syllabus from Professor Thompson's class?
I looked it over.
Well, did you see the part about the assignments?
You mean the part describing the assignments? What we have to do for each assignment?
No, I mean the part about the due dates for the assignments.
Oh, you mean the part about late assignments. About how the professor doesn't like late assignments?
Yeah, that part. It seems kind of strict, doesn't it? You don't think he actually means it, do you? That he won't accept any late assignments, even if we're sick?
Actually, I'm quite sure he does mean it. Absolutely.
Why are you so sure of that?
Because that's how he's always been, from what I know. I heard about a student who was in his class, and this student was in an accident on his bicycle, one that wasn't his fault, and he was in the hospital. He'd even broken his arm and couldn't write, and Professor Thompson wouldn't even accept any late papers from him.
Not even from a guy who was in the hospital with a broken arm and couldn't write because of the broken arm?
Not even from him.
Well then, I guess Professor Thompson's pretty serious about the policy on late papers.
He certainly is.
Speaking review exercise. Skills 5 through 8. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Do you understand the assignment for the research project in our history class?
I think so.
Well, I'm not quite sure what the assignment is. What do you think we're supposed to do?
Well, we're supposed to choose one event or person and research that event or person, and then write about it from positive and negative perspectives.
That's what I thought the syllabus said, but it seems strange. Why do you think the professor wants us to do this?
I don't know for sure, but I can think of 2 reasons why he might.
What are they?
Number 1, I think he wants to get across to us that research involves a number of sources, not just one.
Yeah, it seems easier to look at just one source, but I understand that we need to look in several sources. That makes sense. Now, what's your second reason?
Number 2, I think the professor wants to get across that a single event can be viewed in different ways. Think of someone like Columbus. In some accounts, he's viewed as a hero, while in other accounts, he's viewed as a villain.
Okay, that makes sense. Now all I need is a good topic. It sounds like maybe you already have yours.
How does the information in the listening passage add to the information in the reading passage? Speaking exercise 10. Number 1. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
An interesting point that I'd like to add about the body of water called the Dead Sea is that it's not actually a sea, but is instead a lake. A rather large lake, but a lake, not a sea. A sea refers to either a division of the ocean or to a large body of water that's partially, but not entirely, enclosed by land, one that opens into an ocean. A lake is a body of water that's entirely enclosed. The North Sea, for example, is a sea because it's a section of the northeastern part of the Atlantic Ocean, and the Mediterranean is a sea because it opens into the Atlantic. Because the Dead Sea is landlocked with no outlet, it's a lake rather than a sea.
Number 2. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Now, I'd like to discuss one particular type of polling, a negative and unfair type of polling known as push polling. Push polling involves trying to plant negative information under the guise of conducting an opinion poll. By this, I mean that a pollster tells someone that he simply wants to ask the person's opinion, and then, instead of merely finding out that person's opinion, tries to surreptitiously implant negative information in the person's mind. A pollster who uses the technique of push polling may call a potential voter who supports candidate X, not to find out which candidate the voter supports, but to implant negative information about candidate X in the voter's mind. The pollster might ask leading questions, such as, would you support candidate X if you knew that he spent time in prison? Or, would you support candidate X if you knew he had a problem with alcohol? The questions asked by a pollster who is push polling are designed more to implant negative information than to find out how the voter actually feels.
Number 3. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
I'd like to talk about something that the Polynesians may have done in their travels. It seems quite possible that the Polynesians actually made it all the way to South America in their travels. And this seems quite astounding when you consider that they were traveling on outrigger canoes made of only 2 tree trunks and a platform. There are a number of indications that the Polynesians may have traveled all the way to South America. One important piece of information that leads historians to believe that the Polynesians made it to South America is that there were plants from South America in Hawaii when Europeans first arrived in Hawaii. How did these plants from South America get to Hawaii before the Europeans arrived there? Quite possibly, it was the Polynesians who carried the plants from South America to the Hawaiian Islands in their outrigger canoes.
Speaking review exercise. Skills 9 through 12. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Let's look at a couple of situations to see the equity theory in action. We'll talk about this theory in terms of a mythical employee, Employee X. In the first situation, a co-worker of Employee X has the same job title as Employee X, does the same amount of work, makes the same amount of money, and has a similar office. In this situation, Employee X will feel satisfied with his job because he and his coworker receive equal returns for their contributions. The second situation is different. In the second situation, a coworker of Employee X has the same job title but does less work, makes more money, and has a bigger office than Employee X. In this situation, Employee X will not feel satisfied because he receives a lower return for his contribution than the coworker.
How does the information in the listening passage add to the information in the reading passage? Speaking exercise 13. Number 1. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hey there, how are you doing?
Oh, just fine, thanks. Listen, can I ask you a question?
Sure. About what?
About the course Cultural History of the United States.
Oh, yeah, that's a great class. I took it last year.
And you really enjoyed it?
I did. I took it with Dr. Abbott. I really enjoyed his course.
I'm glad. Listen, I saw that 2 different professors are teaching the course next quarter, and I was wondering if you could recommend one of them. It sounds like you enjoyed Dr. Abbott's course and would recommend him.
I did enjoy Dr. Abbott's class, but, well, it's not for everyone.
What do you mean that it's not for everyone?
Oh, I really enjoyed it, but not everyone did.
Why not?
In Dr. Abbott's course, we didn't need to memorize a lot of details.
That sounds good.
And there was a lot of interesting discussion.
That sounds good too. Why were some of the students unhappy with the course?
It was the exams. The exams were all essay exams. Some people didn't like that.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't like that either. By the way, do you know anything about the other professor who teaches the same course, Dr. Becker? Do you know anything about Dr. Becker's course? Is it just like Dr. Abbott's course?
I've heard it's really different. Dr. Becker's a lot more concerned about details. She really concentrates on the details.
Do you know what her exams are like? Are they essay exams like Dr. Abbott's?
I've heard that her exams are all multiple choice. There aren't any essays.
That part of it sounds good to me, but memorizing a lot of details doesn't. The lively discussion in Dr. Abbott's course also sounds good, but the essay exams don't. I've got to think about this some more before I make a decision, but thanks for your help.
Number 2. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hey, Alan, are you going to the game tonight?
Oh, I can't, Anne. I have an exam on Friday, and I need to study for it.
It's too bad you're going to miss the game. It's going to be a great one. You should have studied earlier so that you could go to the game, you know.
I wish I had, but I didn't, and now I've got to spend tonight and tomorrow reviewing my notes.
It takes that much time for you to review your notes?
I know it shouldn't take that much time, but it does.
Why does it, do you think?
Well, when I'm in class, I think I take really good notes. I think I understand what the professor's talking about, and I write down lots of stuff. It all makes sense at the time. But then it's usually a few weeks until there's an exam, and when I go back to my notes from a few weeks earlier, the notes don't make any sense. That's why it takes so much time for me to review my notes. The notes from a few weeks ago, the ones that I thought were so good, just don't make sense after a few weeks. So it takes a lot of time to sort them out. You see what my problem is?
I think I understand what your problem is. And, even better, I think I know what you could do to solve the problem.
You do? What?
I think the most important thing I do, right after I take notes during a lecture, is to go over the notes and reorganize them.
Really? You do that?
I do. I think that one of the most important things my high school advisor told me about university studies, and about lecture notes in particular, was to never let them get cold. What she meant was that you shouldn't just take notes during class and forget about the notes for a while until the last minute before an exam. Instead, you should review the notes within a day or so. Review them and organize them, if necessary.
Is that what you do?
Yes, and it saves me so much time because it's much easier to prepare for exams this way.
I guess it can't hurt me to give it a try with the lectures that are coming up, but right now I need to go prepare for the exam on Friday.
So you can't go to the game?
I really do wish I could, but I can't.
Number 3. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hi, Mike. Do you have a moment? I'd like to talk with you about something.
Sure, Nikki. I have a few minutes before I have to head over to my next class. What's your question?
It's about independent study, about an independent study project with Dr. Lee. You did an independent study project last year, and you did your project with Dr. Lee, didn't you?
I sure did. You have a question about that?
I do. I'd like to know what it's like. How to do a good job of it.
Maybe I'm not the best person to talk about this because I didn't do a very good job on my project, I don't think.
Well, then maybe you can talk with me about what not to do, how not to do a project.
Now, that's my area of expertise. I can tell you about what you shouldn't do. Okay, well, first of all, and most important, you need to work on your project regularly. You'll only have meetings with Dr. Lee once a month. What I did was, to not do any work on my project for about 3.5 weeks each month, and then I'd spend a couple of days just before meeting with Dr. Lee working on nothing but my project.
That certainly doesn't sound like the best way to do a project like this. I need to work on the project throughout each month before I meet with Dr. Lee, instead of putting all the work off until the last few days of each month. That makes sense. Okay, what else can you tell me to help me with the project? Or what else can you tell me not to do?
Let's see. Okay, something else you should keep in mind, and I had trouble with this too when I was working on my project, is that it's an independent study project.
So it means that you work on the project independently?
It also means that you determine the direction your research will take. Dr. Lee doesn't do that.
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I kept expecting Dr. Lee to tell me what I should do next, but he expected me to figure out what I should do and then discuss it with him.
Oh, I see now. I need to take charge of figuring out the direction the project should take and not expect Dr. Lee to do that.
Exactly. Think about these things if you decide to work on an independent study project with Dr. Lee. Then you should be able to do a much better job than I did.
Speaking review exercise. Skills 13 through 15. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Are you enjoying Professor Taylor's class?
Not exactly.
Why not? Why don't you like it?
Well, I get bored in class. It's a 2-hour class twice a week, and usually within 15 minutes of the start of the class, I'm nodding off. And it's really hard for me to keep my head up and try to keep my eyes open for the next 2 hours. One of these days, I'm going to fall asleep outright and start snoring out loud right in the middle of class.
Well, maybe you need to get involved in the class. If you're involved in the class, you can't possibly fall asleep.
But how do I do that?
Let me think about it. Let's see. How many students are in your class?
It's a big class. There are about 60 students in a large classroom.
Where do you sit?
I sit in the back because I always start falling asleep.
Well, sit in the front of the classroom. Sit right up in the front. It's too easy to let your mind wander when you're in the back of the classroom, and you need to be involved in the class. So you should sit right up at the front of the classroom, close to the professor.
Okay, I can try sitting in the front and hope that I don't fall asleep right under the professor's nose. Now, do you have anything else to suggest?
Well, does the professor just lecture, or does he talk with the students? Ask the students questions, or answer questions from the students?
He lectures mostly, but sometimes he asks questions, and he'll always answer questions if the students ask.
Do you ever answer any questions the professor asks?
No, I can't, because I'm usually sitting in the back of the room.
Well, then sit in the front and answer questions the professor asks. Now, have you ever asked the professor a question in class?
No.
Not ever?
No, not ever.
Well, ask questions. Sit in the front of the classroom and ask questions. No wonder you're not involved in the class. You can take steps to get yourself involved in the class, and then you just might begin to enjoy it a whole lot.
What does the woman suggest the man can do to deal with his problem? Speaking exercise 16. Number 1. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Today we're going to be talking about the bank holiday of 1933. A holiday. A bank holiday. Sounds like a nice thing, doesn't it? But it really wasn't. It occurred when the U.S. banking system was in serious trouble in 1933. But somehow this situation became known as a holiday rather than as a disaster. Let's talk about what led up to the bank holiday of 1933. In the 1920s, banking in the United States hadn't been very stable, and it wasn't unusual for banks to fail. Then, after the stock market crashed in 1929, the problem with banks became much worse. By 1933, more than half the states had closed banks. The solution to this problem was when President Roosevelt called a bank holiday. This bank holiday meant that all banks were closed for a period of days while the federal government worked to reorganize the banking system. One of the bills passed by the government at the time was federal deposit insurance, which means that any money deposited in U.S. banks would be insured by the federal government. Since the time of the bank holiday, the situation has improved considerably. The number of banks that fail has decreased sharply, and the number of people to lose money by depositing it in a federally insured account has remained at 0.
Number 2. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Today we're going to talk about creativity. Think about it for a moment. What is creativity? How would you define creativity? It's kind of difficult, isn't it? Let's look at what the experts have to say about this. Rather than actually defining creativity, experts try to list what characteristics are part of creativity. Many researchers have studied creativity and have come up with lists of characteristics that their research has shown to be part of creativity. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you understand, various researchers are not in complete agreement as to what actually constitutes creativity. There are, however, 2 characteristics that are widely accepted in research as being constituent parts of creativity. These 2 components of creativity are originality and appropriateness. Let's think about these 2 components of creativity, originality and appropriateness, in terms of a problem you need to solve, a problem that requires a creative solution. Can you see how originality and appropriateness would be part of a creative solution? First, let's think about originality. If you need a creative solution to a problem, the solution you need isn't the normal everyday solution that everyone comes up with. It must be an original solution, something new, something different. And now let's think about appropriateness. When you're looking for a solution to a problem, it has to be an appropriate solution, doesn't it? If you suggest a solution to a problem, but the solution isn't appropriate, say it can't be used because it will offend people or it won't solve the problem because it doesn't fit the problem, this isn't a good solution. Thus, we've seen that for an idea to be creative, it has to minimally be original and appropriate. There may be other component parts to creativity, but originality and appropriateness are certainly part of it.
Number 3. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Have you ever wondered why the huge river in South America is called the Amazon? Well, 2 sources seem to have contributed to this name. One of these 2 sources for the modern name of the river is the original native name for the river, and the other source is a chronicle written when Europeans first explored the river in the 16th century. The native inhabitants living near the giant river certainly must have contributed in part to the modern name of this river. The name given by the native inhabitants to this large river was something like the modern name. The native inhabitants called the river Amazulu, which in their language meant big wave. I'm sure you can hear the similarity between the native name Amazulu and today's modern name, Amazon. However, today's modern name didn't come entirely from the native name for the river. There was another important source for the name Amazon, and this source comes from a 16th century chronicle of the European exploration of the river. In early Greek literature, there were descriptions of a society of brave female warriors called Amazons. When the Europeans were exploring the river in the 16th century, a chronicle of the trip was kept. This chronicle of the exploration of the river in the 16th century contains descriptions of courageous female warriors, much like the female warriors described in ancient Greek literature. The chronicler made reference to the Amazon-like warriors on the river called Amazulu by the natives, which both helped to contribute to the river's modern name, Amazon.
Speaking review exercise. Skills 16 through 18. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Something that affects some residents of Alaska and other societies in the far north of the globe during the winter months is a disorder called SAD. SAD is actually an acronym, SAD, and it stands for Seasonal Affective Disorder. S for seasonal, A for affective, and D for disorder. In the summertime, Alaska is blessed with a tremendous amount of sunshine. 20 hours of sunshine a day in Anchorage, and 22 hours of sunshine a day in Fairbanks. In the winter, however, the opposite occurs, and there are long, long hours of darkness and only an occasional few hours of sunshine. If the sky during the hours when sunshine is possible isn't cloudy or stormy. During these long periods of darkness, interrupted by little or no sunlight, residents can be afflicted by SAD, or Seasonal Affective Disorder, a serious kind of clinical depression. Estimates of the percentage affected by SAD range from 10 to 20% of the population. There's actually a physiological cause of this disorder, one that's related to the lack of regular sunlight. When the human body receives less sunlight, it produces less serotonin and more melatonin than usual. Serotonin is a hormone that causes humans to feel cheerful and positive, and less serotonin is produced when there's inadequate sunlight. Melatonin is a hormone that causes humans to feel drowsy and fall asleep, and more melatonin is produced when there's inadequate sunlight. It's this combination of reduced serotonin and increased melatonin that's the cause of seasonal affective disorder in areas where sunlight is reduced considerably for several months at a time.
What points does the professor make about SAD? Speaking post-test. In this section of the test, you will be able to demonstrate your ability to speak about a variety of topics. In questions 3 and 4, you will first read a short text. You will then listen to a talk on the same topic. You will then be asked a question about what you have read and heard. You will need to combine appropriate information from the text and the talk to provide a complete answer to the question. You need to demonstrate your ability to speak clearly and coherently, and to accurately convey information about what you read and heard. In questions 5 and 6, you will first listen to part of a conversation or a lecture. You will then be asked a question about what you heard. You need to demonstrate your ability to speak clearly and coherently, and on your ability to accurately convey information about what you heard. You may take notes while you read and while you listen to the conversations and lectures. You may use your notes to help you prepare your response. Listen carefully to the directions for each question. The directions will not be written on the screen. Question 3. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hey, Sue, are you heading over to the snack bar?
Yes, I am. So you heard that the main cafeteria is closed?
I didn't hear about it. I read the notice.
There's a notice about the main cafeteria being closed?
Yeah, there is. It's posted on the door of the main cafeteria. I went over to the cafeteria for lunch, and I read the notice, so now I'm going to one of the snack bars.
Sorry you had to walk all the way over there for nothing. I heard about the cafeteria being closed from one of the students in my class. so I didn't have to walk all the way over there for nothing.
Listen, do you know why the cafeteria is closed? I can't believe it's closed during the semester.
I heard there was a fire. Some people were in there cooking this morning, and a fire got started.
That would explain why the cafeteria is closed.
How does the information in the listening passage add to the information in the reading passage? Question 4. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
As a teacher, it's important for you to recognize that you can take steps to establish the appropriate kind of social environment to meet the goals of each activity. It's not enough to recognize that certain types of social environments can exist in the classroom. It's also necessary to understand that you can take steps to ensure that the social environment is appropriate for a particular activity. To establish a cooperative environment, your role is to get across to the students that a particular task is to be completed in pairs or in groups, and that only those responses that have been agreed upon by the entire group will be accepted. To establish a competitive environment, your role is to get across to the students that they must work alone and that their responses will be evaluated in comparison with responses from other students. To establish an individualistic environment, your role is to get across to the students that they are to work alone and that they are to do the best job they can, and that they'll be evaluated based upon a predetermined scale rather than on how well they do in comparison with other students.
How does the information in the listening passage supplement the information in the reading passage? Question 5. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Hey, Beth. I saw you running across campus this morning. What was the hurry?
Oh, hi, Todd. I do that every morning I'm on campus. This morning was nothing unusual.
You go running across the campus every morning just for fun?
Oh, I'm not running for fun. I have to do that. It's the only way I can get to class on time.
You have 2 classes in a row that are on opposite sides of the campus?
Oh, it's much worse than that. I have 4 classes in a row, and I seem to have managed to choose 4 classes with one in each of the 4 corners of campus. So every day I end up running from the first class to the second, and from the second class to the third, and from the third class to the last one.
Why on earth did you schedule your classes that way?
It sounded like a good idea when I scheduled my classes. I thought it was a good idea to bunch my classes together. I have classes at 8 o'clock in the morning, at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and at 11 o'clock Monday through Thursday. It means that I'm finished with all of my classes by noon.
But it's not working out for you, is it?
No, it's not. I can't get from one class to the next without running because the classes are so far apart. And even though I move pretty quickly from class to class, I'm still usually late to each class. Here I thought I was making such a great schedule for myself when I selected these classes. I mean, it does sound nice to have all of my classes in the morning 4 days a week, doesn't it?
That part of it sounds good. It would be nice to have afternoons and evenings free, but the part where the classes are so far apart and you have to run from class to class and you're still late all of the time, that part doesn't sound so good.
It's not, I can assure you.
Maybe next semester you need to consider where your classes meet and not just when they meet.
That absolutely makes sense to me.
How does the man feel about the problem the woman has? Question 6. Listen to the passage. On a piece of paper, take notes on the main points of the listening passage.
Today we're going to talk about the planet Mars, and in particular, how people got the notion that Mars was inhabited by intelligent beings. We know today that there are no English-speaking, human-like beings with intelligence superior to ours populating the planet. But for quite some time, people believed that there were. Where did this idea come from? Do you know? As often happens, we'll see that the idea that there might be human-like inhabitants on Mars, at least in part, was based on an error, a linguistic error of sorts. This linguistic error has to do with the word canale in Italian. In 1877, an Italian astronomer was looking through a telescope at Mars. and he saw what looked like thin, straight lines on its surface. He called these faint lines canali. In Italian, the word canali can refer to either something natural or something man-made. In English, however, a canal is something man-made and a channel is something natural. A canal is man-made, as in the Erie Canal, while a channel is a natural depression, as in the English Channel. When the Italian astronomer called the lines on Mars canali, he most likely meant natural geographic features. However, when the word canali was translated into English, it was translated as canal. From this, it was understood that astronomers were saying that there were features that had been constructed on Mars. If the features had been constructed, then the obvious conclusion would be that there were living beings on Mars who constructed the canals. Unfortunately, that wasn't what the astronomer meant. The astronomer was describing natural features on Mars rather than constructed ones.
What points does the professor make about the planet Mars? This is the end of CD 3.